Okay, thanks for coming. There's open seats. I must have heard that Bobby wasn't teaching. Day one. So y'all, last week we discussed the 7 days model and how we have unique principles and we have universal principles. And as we go through this, everybody hopefully has this handout you can reference. Today we're talking about day one. The day one is the day you were born. This is kind of, as Bobby says, the day you look around. This is an extremely unique day, and as you remember from his model, this is one of the unique principles. Everyone's day one is completely different, which sometimes can cause struggles, and that we'll talk about some of that. So this is the day you look around. I'm going to continue to refer to this model because I feel like this model, if you can imprint this in your brain, it gives you a really good inventory of things to take in because you'll see different things pop up in different days. Okay? And day one is kind of, lots of times is going to tell you these two. I guess day one will inform you also of some of your passions. But this is something that, this lens has been really impactful for me to filter things through and to understand where I can add value to the world, where I can reflect more of the things God's given me to the world, and the intersection of these three things is highly important to remember. So keep this in your mind. All right, so day one. Let's talk about the day you were born. What things occurred, or what things were occurring on the day that you were born that you had no control over? All of it, right? All right. Do you have any control over your gender? You didn't have any control of that, did you? Couldn't do anything to change that. Gender's one. Your parents. All right, and let's talk about that a little bit. What about your parents is impactful to you from day one?
Their health.
No, okay. Your parents' health. How healthy were they? How active were they?
Their beliefs.
Their beliefs. Yeah, religion. Okay, excellent, perfect.
And mold who you are.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that too.
Their struggles.
Their struggles. What were their hardships? What was the difficulty in your household?
Whether they were good parents or bad parents.
Good parents or bad parents? Were they active or not? What about their occupations or their education? Yeah? Is that good? What else? Yes. What was the economic context that you were born into? What else do we have? These are all really highly unique things, right, to your household. What about the region of the world that you lived in? Whether you were born into a city or born into a rural area, right? What did I just say? Location. Yeah. So the fun thing to do here is take any of these and change them. Say you grew up in a Catholic house. Anybody grew up in a Catholic house? Probably not. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what if you didn't grow up in that Catholic house? What would change about where you are now? What if lots of us grew up in the Church of Christ, right? Probably lots of us are here today because we were born in the Church of Christ. But if we weren't? If we were born in another country, probably the Church of Christ didn't even exist, right? It's not even a thing. So these are all things that you. What else besides gender and parents?
Whether you had siblings or not.
All
Where
right.
are you in the birth order?
We could do a whole class on that, couldn't we? She did. She did a whole class on that. So where you are in birth order plays a big role, believe it or not, in where you are today. So the high level, as Shane has shared, is God, money, education, and opportunity. If you're in a really well-based economic situation, if your parents have lots of resource, your starting point is different than others, right? So this is all your trajectory. So I promise one baseball analogy every time I teach. This is a trajectory. This is when the ball leaves the hand, okay? Lots of things can happen after the ball leaves the hand, but this is when the ball leaves the hand. Day one. Let's think about this from a biblical context, because this sometimes helps also. Who were biblical characters who had unique context surrounding their births?
Moses.
That since we know the ending, Moses? Since we know the ending, we can say, yeah, that makes sense. What about Moses? Was unique?
He was destined to die, but then
So he was a Jew, right? And then his mom put him in the basket, and then he was raised in an Egyptian household. We know how that story turned out, right? And how so uniquely placed he was because of that situation. Who else?
John the Baptist. And Jesus.
What about him?
He had the Holy Spirit before he came out of the womb, the Bible says, Luke says. That puts him on a somewhat different trajectory. The other people didn't get to somewhat the Holy Spirit to it.
What happened when the moms came in the same room together? How did that uniquely place him?
Somewhat predestined.
Right? Who else?
Joseph.
I'm going to go with Joseph first, because the
About birth order.
that's right. Right? And the context that he was raised in informed a lot of what he did, right?
Saved the nation.
So all of these guys, day ones. I heard one more name in the last one that I think is really obvious too, but go ahead. Who said it? Jesus, yeah. You could say his day one was his conception was immaculate, right? So all of these guys, as we talk about day one and we talk about the end, because we know the end of these guys' stories, right? We've already seen these. Where Shane talked about the story, and this is something else that I think is really impactful. God has a story, and we don't know what the end is. We know the beginning, and somewhere along his story, we come in, and our story belongs here. And while these guys lived in here, and we know their story, we know the end of their story, so we can easily say how, well, it makes perfect sense that Moses did that because he was born that way. But how many of us take the time to look back on how we were born and said, this is why we're here. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Or this is what I need to be better at, right? Because these unique so Colton Shannon, we did this class in the youngsters class last quarter. And Colton Shannon, if y'all know him, I'll refer to him a little bit later also. He's a counselor. He likes etymology, so he looked up the root of this word. And the root of that word is has to do with a favorable wind into the port. All right, I don't know the root, actual root, but that's what the meaning of opportunity is. It's a favorable wind into the port. This is something you have no control over. You can change the sails, right? You can raise the sails, lower the sails, misdirect the sails, but this is a favorable wind into the port. So this is day one. A lot of day one lies in this. So context is important. So these are all really unique things, right? This is Moses is unique. I think there's some more universal, although this is a unique principle within this model, there's some more universal things like that obviously you have no control over, maybe even your parents had no control over. So let's look at that also. Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, Paul Allen, Steve Jobs. What do all these guys have in common? Computers. All are pioneers in the computer industry. Of course, they're all wealthy, right? But they were all born within 1 year of each other. So the generation that you were born in, I guess most of us are Gen Xers, right? Like, how does that impact how does the generation that we were raised in, the technology that was available or not when we were raised, how does that impact who we are today? How does that impact our world, our lens? So these gentlemen were born. To expand on that a little bit, these veterans in the computer industry tell you that the most important months in the computer revolution was January of 1975. One particular month, because that was when a magazine, Popular Electronics, ran a cover story about an incredible machine called the Altair 8800. And anybody who knew anything about computers wanted that. Anybody remember that? That was slightly before my time. But all these men entered the job market at the same time. So you think that college graduates today, those who graduated just this past May, maybe even last May, you think that their perspectives and the tools that they have are completely different than what it is for you when you enter the workforce? So, like, mechanical engineering was a thing when I was in school. It still is slightly, but like computers and AI programming is so much more impactful than mechanics. So these guys were all born within a year of each other and all entered the workforce when this significant point in history had been made. And they were all able to leverage that to make millions, billions. Another biblical perspective. This is a concept that Malcolm Gladwell spoke of. Anybody read Outliers? May have that book, Outliers. So this is it's called the Matthew effect. Who wants to read Matthew 25:29? It's one simple verse. Matthew 25 and verse 29.
Everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him.
So Gladwell spoke of this. This is the last verse in. Does anybody know the context? What happened before this verse? You read back up ahead, you can see it's a really famous story. The parable of the talents. This is something we'll revisit later in the class in a different day. But I think it's really, really interesting that like this is the day one. The day one in this story is the day that the owner or the caretaker, I guess, the boss man, the ruler, gave out talents. That was day one for those servants. And what they did with the stuff that was given to them on day one really impacted the things that they were going to do later. They were all given different things too, weren't they? They all had a different trajectory. So it's important to know that. Now, when Gladwell refers to this, he refers to a sociologist named Robert Merton who identified a phenomenon that he refers to as the Matthew effect based on this verse. In the book, when he's speaking about the Matthew effect, Gladwell refers to professional hockey and the fact that a large percentage, more than 40% of NHL players, of elite hockey players, were born between January and March. This is because the cutoff for hockey in the cutoff for the age in hockey to start was January 1st. So if you were born January 1st or January 2nd, you couldn't play until the next year if you're 10 years old. So you're a really, really big 10-year-old by the time you get to play. So coaches see you. Coaches see that you're bigger. You handle the puck a little bit better because you're a year more old. Yeah, a year older. I'm thinking. Wow, this is a simple word. Yeah, all that. That's fine. But yes. So you're a year more mature. So you obviously are going to stick out. So you're going to get more play time. Anybody ever coached a t-ball or baseball or anything? Yeah. Did you put the big kids in or the little kids? Well, we let everybody play. But when the game depended on it, we put the big kids in, didn't we? So they got experience. They got more experience. So the rich get richer in this way, right? This is the Matthew effect. And so it turns out that lots of those kids who were born in those months got more opportunity and therefore turned out to be much greater hockey players. That doesn't mean the other ones couldn't. It also didn't mean that they were a shoo-in. But it meant that they had a better chance because the trajectory, when the ball left the hand, was in their favor. So who cares? How does this inform you in the second half? Harden says, it is what it is. I don't know. I mean, what am I going to do with it now? At this point, I've already done what I need to do.
Let's go back to Esther. It's such a time as this. John Maxwell says, when the opportunity rises, you got to go for it. It's easier to take one talent, turn it into two, than it is 7 to double it up. So most of the power of one talent people, do what you can do, and don't work the rest. Serve God, keep His commandments.
All right.
I see a lot of people miss the opportunity.
Take advantage, right? Take advantage.
All
This,
the same purpose.
because this is day one is really like when you start with day one, your circle's like this big, right? And so I love this is a phenomenon, if you will, that occurred to me during the last class I was teaching when we were teaching this, because I started making these circles bigger, and as you make these circles bigger, guess what happens? This gets bigger too, right? So day one, you got a really small circle here. But through life, you keep adding to that. It's important to take inventory of those things. Now, everybody can step back and say, this is what I accomplished in my career. I went to school here, right? But go all the way back to day one and tell yourself how that impacts you now. So this is another thing that I think is really important. It's your origin story, and it's the beginning But just like what we talked about these guys as a perfect example, their day one led to something very, very unique in the second half. Anybody know how old this guy was when he saw the burning bush? Must have been 20-something, right? Because he floated in the basket, and then he got raised up, right? And then he wandered a little bit. He killed a guy, and he wandered a little bit. And yeah, they say they do the math, and it's like 80 or 83 because it says 40 years had passed and 40 years he wanted or something. So this guy was 80, which I think back then wasn't quite his second half. I think he was pretty old, but for sure, right? He was mature. He'd experienced a bunch. He had some big circles here. But he didn't even get to the most important part of his calling until the second half. All right, today, everybody has a set of values. How many of those values came to you from day one? How many of the values that you hold right now came to you from day one? Harding, what's something really important to you? I got to pick on you.
God and family.
How much of that came to you from day one?
Depends on how you look at it. I think there was already things set in motion. My grandma used to tell me that, she said one time, Harding, the church came through the women for 4 generations. The men were good men, but they passed through them. So there's a foundation there before that was set for me to go forward. She was kind of telling me, you boys need to take this and be men. Not that my grandfather was not men, but there's one point is there's a foundation there before I got there. But I learned these things. It was driven into me, and for example, for me after I was born years to come.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know exactly what answer you're looking for.
That's it. That's it. Whether we think it's right or it's wrong, what we think is right or wrong. The thing that's really difficult about day one is it's a unique thing for everyone. But it informs us of what is normal. What is normal or what is acceptable. Even if you grew up in a bad home, you're exposed to things. So that is something that's normal. It may not be something you want to repeat, but it's not something that's foreign to you. It's a very, very unique thing, but guess what we do? We apply that to everywhere else. And even if we try really, really hard not to, we think that everybody else has some exposure to that. Surely that's not that strange. Surely I'm not that unique. And we process all of that. So we're informed of our feelings from day one. How much of our behavior is informed from that? The way you react. The way you react to your son pre-adolescence, the way you react to your son or daughter in teenage years, the way you react to them as they leave for college. What you expect of them, what informs you of that expectation? It comes from day one. You can adjust, but the trajectory is when the ball leaves the hand is sets a lot of things in motion. Things that you had no control over. These are the things you repeat with your spouse. This is like the root of modern counseling, right? I texted Colton Shannon this week and asked him, he's a counselor, what is the most impactful things? What are the things that we carry the most from childhood? Or what impacts us as adults from day one? And he said our childhood years are when our limbic brain is being developed. This is the part of the brain where our heart is, so to speak. So whatever our childhood home was like is what we unconsciously use to expect what's coming from other people in our life in a relationship way. So whatever we experienced, either good or bad, and we can filter some of that. We know that's bad behavior, but it's still not abnormal. We can adjust, we can change. I'm not going to be that way. But it's still there, and we know we're resistant to that. So in the second half of life, if we're not aware of the things that informed us of how we see the world, or what we can expect, or what we think is normal, or what we think is abnormal, if we don't take inventory of those things and we continue just to move, that subconscious limbic brain will dominate our behaviors and keep us from growing and being the best we can be, right? That's what the class is about. Co-creating and living the best life of purpose in our second half. And if we don't take the time to step back and look at day one, then we can't fulfill that greatest achievement or greatest potential. How does your rearing affect your relationships? Somebody answer that.
If you're a daughter who has a loving dad who, treated you well, then that's the example, the model that you go by to find a husband.
Everybody said that's a real common thing, isn't it? You marry somebody like your dad, or marry somebody like your mother. That's because that's where you find the most comfort, or that's where you find the most familiarity. Even when it's bad, right? Sometimes even when it's bad, you'll look for that. And wonder why it repeats. We talk about breaking the cycle. Breaking the cycle means I'm looking at day one and I'm taking a really strong inventory on all this stuff and saying, what is, now that I've added some of this stuff, what is normal, what is abnormal? What is right or what is wrong according to the way that my day one started?
I think you learn communication or not,
Uh-huh.
conflict or not. And that's the patterns you take into your own relationships. And if you're not, if you don't allow your spouse to be your mirror for that,
Mm-hmm.
then we tend to get real defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just my house. Don't say anything about my dad. Like, that's my dad. And your spouse can be, is the person you bring into your life. She looks at your family and goes, "What is that about?" And you're like, "What do you mean? That's my family."
That's normal.
Right. So if you let that play out into some good conversations, you can kind of make logical decisions and be intentional about where you want to go next, especially now.
How does that resurface in the second half of life? We've in the last class, again, because Colton was in the last class, we talked a lot to him about the recent, I don't know if recent, maybe it's proximity bias, but it feels like there's a lot of divorce in our circles right now. And the question for that is why is that? And a lot of that comes to the day one. And in the second half of life, your day one hits you in the face, I'm told, when you're empty nesters. It really comes back hard. Your day one really comes back hard in day one. Your day one comes back in really hard during empty nesting. Now you look across the table after you did the honeymoon thing and you enjoyed each other's and you were both full of vigor and energy. You were pursuing careers. You were building things together. You built stuff. You had kids and survived. because that's really all you can do, right? And then they left the home. And you're back to as close to day one again, strangely, as you have been, and probably the first time you've ever really been at day one with your spouse. And so in the second half of life, day one can be really, really impactful. And as we talk about all the days that we need to go through, it becomes really important in the second half to stop and reassess, because that's probably something that we're not doing, is reassessing what our day one beliefs are and what was put there, and how does that balance out with where we are now as a couple. How does that balance out now with what we've built? And
I think unlike, I don't want to say too much, but unlike the first day one, where it was just me,
mm-hmm.
now I've got somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's we. What is our day one? I mean, we each have our own thing too, but the circles are bigger, but there's two of us now in there that have to figure out.
Yeah, I can even draw that. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Find both our purpose
Like
somehow.
model.
Yeah.
How do you, what's my
Come out from the
purpose,
board.
what's yours, and how do those go together? What do we want to do for the rest of what we've got left? Do we have a common purpose? And do we want there to be a common purpose? How are we going to serve? Which is different than, my college major and what I want to do with my life and what I think it was going to play out as earlier.
So day one, as in the second half, is really impactful to what you want to do. Your legacy looks a lot different if you don't respond in the empty nest well. Your legacy looks a lot different if you don't go back and take, right? You just become that old curmudgeon hiding in the woods and or in the garage and or in the quilting room or the crafting room or whatever it may be. You can find lots of ways to hide. You find lots of ways to hide from this. Is it bunco? The VFW? There's healthy and unhealthy ways, but even if it's a healthy way, you can still be hiding, right? Understand what happened in day one and how it informs you of where you are now. Now, from the time the ball left.
I was just thinking, the value of this. Sometimes we can think of our origin story
Mm-hmm.
as kind of, I don't know, the rut we're in, and we can use that, but in some way, Jesus comes and interrupts all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always an invitation there.
Mm-hmm.
And like the point of the parable of the talents is what?
To use what's given to you, yeah.
The initiative
That's right.
you take, not the amount that's given, but the initiative
Mhm.
that you take with that. But I think the value of understanding your origin story is that it can reveal you to some maybe blind spots that you aren't aware of yourself.
100%.
And yet Jesus doesn't let us just be defined by how tough our beginning was or how great it was.
That's right.
He always invites us out of that.
That's so the baseball analogy. When the ball leaves the hand, it's not always a straight trajectory, right? We were watching baseball nowadays, we talk about spin rate a lot. We talk about horizontal movement. So the ball's path is very rarely straight now. So understand that the direction can change, and you have some influence on the spin rate. Sorry.
If I understand where I'm coming from and the things that influence me, it's maybe going to help me ask questions
100%.
and discover maybe blind spots that I had, and then healing can come through that.
And I would suggest if you don't, then you can't fulfill the potential that you have. I think it's very, very difficult until day two. We'll talk about day two next. Maybe not next week. When are we talking about day? Anyway, day two, is it next week? Okay, day two is next week, and what you're saying right now is the day two. So With or without an inventory, you can do anything you want to do with the Holy Spirit. But I'm stealing from somebody's thunder next week. So day 2 is very, very important. Who has experience with the Enneagram? Show of hands. I'm really interested to see how many people have done any study. Okay. I'm not qualified. Bobby could do a whole class on Enneagram, but I read some of the same books he reads. So this is one of those things that I think is really profound, because in the Enneagram you find this they talk about personality and essence, and they talk about the things that you are born into, the things that you learned to defend yourself from, and the behaviors that you developed. But then they talk about your essence or your spirit also. So this spiritual and psychological intersection is what the emphasis on Enneagram is. I'm going to read just a little bit out of this book really fastly. Really fast. The core truth that the Enneagram conveys to us is that we are much more than our personality. Our personalities are no more than the familiar, conditioned parts of a much wider range of potentials that we all possess. Beyond the limitations of our personalities, each of us exists as a vast, largely unrecognized quality of being or presence, what is called our essence. In spiritual language, we could say that within each person is an individual spark of the divine, which we all believe also, right? Although we have forgotten this fundamental truth because we have fallen asleep to our true nature. We do not experience our own divine nature, nor do we experience others as manifestations of the divine. Instead, we become hard, even cynical, treating others as objects to be defended against or used for our own gratification. This is what happens as we are in our childhood homes, in this context. If it's good, we lean into it. If it's bad, we defend ourselves from it. And whatever behaviors we developed in our day 1 carry all the way into our adulthood. So those of you who said you have experience with the Enneagram, who feels like that really hit close to home when you first took Enneagram and understood that it was? Personally, it did me. I say it felt like I was looking in a mirror naked, which is probably a bad analogy. Sorry. I'm sorry that I did that to y'all. But it was a really vulnerable thing when you read into it. They're like, what? Well, I didn't really feel that way. I'm an 8. Yeah, I agree with that. Oh yeah, I agree with all those things. But why are you an 8? And what are you protecting yourself? Well, I don't really believe that. Did I? And then you really start to think, like, oh, okay. So it challenges you, but makes you look at what it was that you started to defend yourself against that made you and give you the personality you have now. It's pretty vulnerable. But in Enneagram, you start to see how day 1 informs you of who you are today. So if you haven't yet and you want to really lean into this as we go through this exploration, do some work. I can send you a link to Enneagram and take the assessment or read some about it because I think it'll help you to really inventory that day 1 experience for yourself. It says, our personalities draw upon the capacities of our inborn temperament to develop defenses and compensations for where we have been hurt in childhood or praised in childhood, what our childhood experiences were. In order to survive whatever difficulties we encountered at that time, we unwittingly mastered a limited repertoire of strategies, self-images, and behaviors that allowed us to cope with and survive in our early environment. So we learned we developed ways to protect ourselves in our early environment based on day 1. And that informs you today of who you are, how you approach things. The purpose of the Enneagram is not to help us get rid of our personality. Even if it could, it would not be very helpful. This is reassuring to those of us who fear that if we let go of our personality, we will lose our identity. In fact, the exact opposite is true. When we get in touch with our essence, we do not lose our personality. It becomes more transparent and flexible, something that helps us live rather than something that takes over our lives. Moments of flow and peak performance arise when we are most present and aware. This will also come up later in our discussion, in our class. So we talked about the using of the talents that we have and the effort that we put in. When we start to identify these things, we start to find areas of our lives where we can reach flow and peak performance. I'm a little bit past, and I'll finish with this real quick. The second half of what Colton responded to me in his text was that he said, to me, the second half of life is all about legacy and giving back. And if an older person has not turned and faced where they come from, then they won't feel safe enough to get back and to give back in meaningful ways. He made a special note for men because I think we're really bad at this. This is the part where nurturing and motherhood inform and prepare women better for this, to do this introspection, to talk about feelings and how they were formed, how I think they're more naturally open to share and to feel. So he hits men. He says we typically won't be able to stop working and building in a building kind of way. And our wives will start wanting more of our heart as grandchildren start to come. And we won't know what to do with that. We're just earners and providers. So that's one example of how this kind of can show up. I think he hits men hard because it's not in our nature a lot. Our protections that we developed in day one maybe are a little bit more rigid. But also as you age and you're a grandparent, the things that you were the most useful for, hunting and providing, are not as necessary anymore. You got a 401k, right? So challenge this week. Take an inventory. Sit down as you think through, as you have your quiet times. Think about your origin story, and think about how that informs you now. And if you want to dig into the Enneagram more, let me know, and I'll help you find some places to do that. Thanks.